So, it's that time of year. That spooky time of year where everyone's greatest fears become reality. Monsters, ghosts, children asking for free food. It really is a living nightmare. So I thought I would take this opportunity to lighten the mood by talking about a game that's nice and happy, but still a little bit spooky. All in the name of having fun this Halloween. And not because I'm too afraid to play an actual horror game. No, instead of playing something critically acclaimed like Resident Evil or Outlast, I've gone for Scooby-Doo Unmasked, a game that nobody cares about. I played a little bit of this game in my childhood, but never finished because I got stuck on the first boss. And to be honest, getting stuck in a game haunts me more than any genuine horror game ever could. Anyway, let's talk about the game. So I was very concerned when I started playing this game. Right off the bat, I didn't have a good feeling about it. It wasn't because the gameplay was bad, or the game looked dodgy, or anything like that. I was concerned because this game's font of choice was Comic Sans. All the text in the game is displayed in Comic Sans. I was not prepared to be confronted with such an alarming red flag so early on. There are only two places in the world where Comic Sans is appropriate. Either in a primary school classroom, or on the flyer for a church bake sale. Those are the only two situations where using Comic Sans is acceptable. You should not be using it in a video game. Even as a placeholder font, it's unacceptable. It's not right. It's not right. After being confronted with it in the main menu mere seconds after starting the game, I leant back in my chair and had a quiet moment to myself to think about what the fuck I had just gotten myself into. Anyway, enough about Comic Sans. What is Scooby-Doo Unmasked? Based on its name, it sounds like a BuzzFeed documentary where they unmask Scooby-Doo and find out that he isn't a talking dog, but is actually a 28-year-old man in a fursuit. That would explain why he talks like that. Whoever wondered why he walks like rat? It's because the man in the suit is trying to talk normally, but his words are being muffled by the Scooby head. It all makes sense. That's not what it is though. Scooby-Doo Unmasked is a linear 3D platformer based on Scooby-Doo. You know, from TV. It follows the standard template for platformers from around this era. You play as Scooby-Doo and travel through 3D levels, jumping over bottomless pits, defeating enemies, collecting collectibles to progress the story. You get it, you've played these types of games before. I don't need to carefully spell out what's going on here like you're all idiots. The plot is pretty much exactly what you'd expect from anything Scooby-Doo. Mystery Inc. are minding their own business, heading to a special effects studio that Fred's cousin Jed works at, when strangely he's disappeared. The owners of the studio reveal that they've created this special material called mubber that can be used to make realistic monsters and special effects, but that a lot of it has been stolen by someone and is being misused. And as you'd expect, it's all down to some ghost bullshit, and the gang decide to get to the bottom of the mystery and find Jed. This game pretty much follows the structure of a Scooby-Doo episode exactly, in the sense that the first 10% of the story is the setup, the next 80% is looking for clues and running away from ghosts, and then the final 10% is the ending where they unmask the villain and explain how everything happened in great detail because the writers know that you weren't actually paying attention to the previous 80%, you just wanted to see the ghosts, and see the funny dog run away from the spooky ghosts. That's all you wanted. You're not interested in the clues and the bad guy's backstory and motive, you just want to see ghosts, and the writers know that. Scooby-Doo Unmasked is literally an interactive episode of Scooby-Doo, which I mean, that's exactly what you want from a Scooby-Doo game. It would be a pretty odd tonal shift for the Scooby-Doo franchise if this game was about Velma being a secret assassin and killing Fred, Daphne and Shaggy, leaving Scooby on his own to track Velma down and avenge his fallen friends. Doesn't quite fit the Scooby-Doo brand, if you ask me. But yeah, the plot is not anything special, but it's very Scooby-Doo, and that's all it needs to be. I just have one complaint about it. Since Scooby-Doo Unmasked is a game, the story obviously needs to be drawn out a bit longer, otherwise it would be over within 20 minutes, and nobody wants to spend $60 on a 20-minute adventure. So the game ends up being multiple Scooby-Doo episodes in one package. I mean, the game is literally split into episodes, with each one having a different villain, and I get that. But there is an overarching storyline that each episode of this game is a part of, and because of that, I feel like the game is lacking the presence of the main villain. Because there is one, there's a main antagonist, but the main antagonist has absolutely no presence whatsoever until the very end of the game. Like, they could have at least included little cutscenes where the main villain is watching the gang from afar, or taunting them somehow. I don't know, it just feels like something is missing. It's like wearing shoes without socks. It functionally works just fine, but there's something that's just slightly off about it, like it doesn't feel quite right. That being said though, the plot of the game is perfectly fine, and I can't fault them for staying faithful to what Scooby-Doo is all about. But to be honest, I'm actually not surprised. When a game is based off of a TV show or a movie, they usually do a decent job of getting it to feel like the source material. I mean, it's not always a perfect video game incarnation of said show or movie, but they often get it somewhere near the mark. In other words, licensed video games usually get the licensed part nailed, but sometimes struggle with the video game part. So since I've established that Scooby-Doo Unmasked does a great job of feeling like Scooby-Doo, the question is, does it do a great job of being a video game? And that's really the most important part. If I wanted to experience a classic Scooby-Doo adventure that perfectly captures the charm of Scooby-Doo, I would just watch Scooby-Doo. I'm here for a video game, and is Scooby-Doo Unmasked a good one? Well, against all odds, yeah. Like I said earlier, Scooby-Doo Unmasked is a 3D platformer where you play as Scooby and traverse 3D levels looking for collectibles to try and solve the mystery of each level. Playing as Scooby is what you do for pretty much the entire game, so it's important that he controls well. And he does. Mostly. Scooby has a bunch of familiar moves up his arsenal. He has a spin attack, a slide attack, a body slam attack, and a roll attack. He can also jump and double jump. On top of this, Scooby is also able to swing on monkey bars, swing on hooks, and slide down zip lines. It's a pretty standard moveset for the main playable character of a platformer, and it gets the job done. At times, Scooby is a little bit stiff, and look, I get it, it happens to the best of us. I sometimes wake up in the morning a little stiff myself. But yeah, Scooby can feel a tiny bit stiff and janky at times, but he mostly controls really well. Can't complain about it too much, since it never actually became a problem while playing the game. But that's not all this game has to offer. Scooby has a few other tricks up his sleeve. At certain points in each level, you'll be able to exchange some of the mubba you've collected to change into costumes. There are 3 costumes in the game, and each grants Scooby different abilities. The first one you unlock is the Kung Fu suit, which gives Scooby a more combat-oriented moveset involving punches and kicks, which helps Scooby deal with swarms of enemies, and also gives him an energy blast move that can break through certain doors. The second is a Bat suit, which basically turns Scooby into Spyro and allows him to glide over long distances. The third and final costume is a Robin Hood suit, which allows Scooby to use a bow to shoot plunges, making for a great ranged attack that is also needed to trigger some distant switches. These costumes all control really well and definitely help give the gameplay some more variety and make the levels more dynamic. On top of that, they aren't game breaking because the costumes disappear once you run under UV lights, which are strategically placed in each level, meaning you can't just use the costumes whenever you want. While they're not the most exciting and innovating of power-ups, they definitely help to keep the levels fresh and interesting. And besides, who doesn't like seeing dogs wear stupid costumes? Really makes you wonder what that 28-year-old is thinking now that he's wearing a costume of a dog wearing a costume. And speaking of levels, to my genuine surprise, they're actually really well designed. There's somehow a perfect mix of being open enough to give you room to explore, and being focused enough to still give you direction so you know what the hell you're supposed to be doing. I remember there were times as a kid where I'd be playing a game that's terrible at giving directions, and I'd sit there for hours on end trying to figure out what the bloody thing wants me to do, and I'd end up wandering around aimlessly, jumping at walls and attacking the environment, trying to figure it out and just get something to happen. In this game, that isn't an issue. The levels in Scooby-Doo Unmasked are all 3D, but they're a mix of open areas and side-scrolling, meaning you're constantly switching between 3D gameplay and 2D gameplay, so to speak. And it's all focused on platforming, which is good. That's what you want in a platformer. There are some levels that I was just blown away by how seemingly perfect they were. The sewer and temple levels in Shuttery Showdown in Chinatown spring to mind here. These levels do something I've never seen in a game like this before. They're linear levels, meaning there is only one path you can take to actually clear the level, but it somehow gives off the illusion that you're exploring a completely open environment. It's probably because you can see the entire level throughout the whole thing, so you can see where you've been and where you're going very clearly, but it's so strange. It doesn't feel linear, but it is absolutely 100% linear, and I just think that's really cool. Well, I say 100% linear, it's more like 80% linear. In every level there are plenty of offshoot areas you can explore to find some extra collectibles, and not all of them are obvious. There are 3 types of main collectibles in this game: clues, ingredients, and trap pieces. Clues are the most important since they're required to progress through the game, and honestly, I think they're the ideal collectible for a Scooby-Doo game like this. Since each episode is based on solving the mystery of that particular location, and looking for clues to solve the mystery is a big part of Scooby-Doo, it's kind of just perfect. And some of them are really well hidden. What I really like as an extra detail is that before you face a boss of an area, Scooby and Velma go through all the clues to try and figure out who is behind all the chaos. So you have to answer Velma's questions by selecting the right clues. That's cute, they didn't need to do that, but it's just an extra little thing that makes it feel like Scooby-Doo, you know? It also just highlights that you do go through these levels for a reason. They give the levels purpose, which I feel like some games forget to do sometimes. Clues also open up new areas in the hub world, so there's actually a reward if you find them all. The other collectibles are ingredients, which you can give to Shaggy to increase Scooby's maximum health, and trap pieces, which unlock monster profiles. To be honest, I think the trap pieces have a lot of missed potential here. Trapping the ghost is also another huge part of Scooby-Doo, so it's kind of a shame that at no point in the game do you use the trap pieces to catch the ghosts. Scooby just kind of fights them, which I'm pretty sure he never does in the actual show. It's a bit strange, but it's not a huge deal. But yeah, these collectibles are generally pretty well hidden. It's not immediately obvious where they all are, which is good. I hate it when games just hand you everything to you with no effort whatsoever. The levels in Scooby-Doo Unmasked encourage exploration while remaining focused and linear, which is a tough balance to get right, I think. But like every other platformer, this game just couldn't resist chucking in some goddamn vehicles. Seriously, what is it with game developers and vehicle levels? In the process of making games, do they reach a point where they go, oh look, we've got a pretty good game here so far, we'd better ruin it with a shitty vehicle, can't be having a flawless game now, can we? Like, I don't understand the thought process. In Scooby-Doo Unmasked, the vehicles aren't great. The sewer surf and water slide are okay, I guess, but any other time a vehicle shows up, it's bad. You've got terrible flying sections that, much like being on an actual plane, are incredibly boring and aren't even remotely fun. Like, come on, you couldn't have at least included some in-flight entertainment? But the worst offender is this flying saucer you use in the boss fight against that caveman. It is utter shit. It controls terribly, the weapons, at best, hardly work. Even the caveman's AI was having trouble, and it's programmed specifically to use this vehicle. It's pretty horrific. It's like watching a Roomba get stuck in a corner and be unable to figure out how to get out of the corner. That's the level of tragic we're talking about here. The boss fights generally aren't that great either. The caveman is the worst one by far, and the fight against the dragon and the giant pterodactyl are also pretty lackluster since they're both just nothing. The one exception to this is the guitar ghoul, who actually has a pretty decent fight, where you need to use the spiders to break his wall of mirrors and attack while he's vulnerable. It's not anything spectacular, but it's enjoyable. It's just a shame that that's the best they could do for boss fights. But I mean, hey, which platformers have good boss fights anyways? What I've neglected to mention is the presentation. For what it is, Scooby-Doo Unmasked has some pretty amazing presentation. For 2005, I think the game looks and sounds great. I mean, it's not perfect, but it looks better than I thought it would, and I think we can all relate to that. We've all had those moments where we stand in front of the mirror and look at ourselves, wink and say, "What's cookin', good looking?" Even though the harsh reality is that most of us are only good looking on the inside. There's also a surprising amount of variety in the levels. It's genuinely impressive how many different level settings they managed to come up with, despite the world of Scooby-Doo being somewhat grounded in the real world. I think the best way of demonstrating this is by showing off the museum. The museum is one of the worlds in this game, and it has 3 levels. When you think of a museum level, you'd probably think of pretty standard hallways littered with display cases full of bits and bobs, and skeletons of prehistoric creatures, that sort of thing. But these museum levels are nothing like that at all. The museum levels in this game take place in a full-on medieval castle, a prehistoric jungle, and in an ocean. I mean, they're all special effects, that's this game's whole thing, but still, they make for some pretty varied settings, and I like that. Even the atmosphere in this game is great. There are ambient, spooky noises, you can see enemies and villains lurking in the background in certain locations. The levels even have mini jump scares built into them. I mean, it's easy to tell when they're coming, but the fact that they're there at all makes the levels feel more alive. But talking about this game's generally good gameplay and presentation brings me on to my biggest issue with the game. It's too short. Like, offensively short. I managed to beat it within a few hours. The game only has 5 worlds. The first world is a tutorial world, and the final world is a slightly longer version of the exact same tutorial world. The 3 worlds in between, Chinatown, the theme park, and the museum, are the bulk of this game, and they're really fun. So it's just really disappointing that they're all this game has to offer. I want more! I wanted to see more levels, more costumes, more locations. I wanted to see what else these developers had in them. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of cut content from this game, because I doubt the original intention would have been to make it this short. It felt like there was a whole second half of this game missing. And it's a shame, because for how short it was really fun. There are so many other spooky locations they could have gone to, even if they were just recycled from the show. Haunted mansions, ancient ruins, castles, ghost towns, all sorts of things. I don't know, I just feel like there could have been and should have been more to this game, so it's a real shame there wasn't. Right then, let's solve the mystery of Scooby-Doo Unmasked once and for all. Is the game good, or is it crap? Well, to my genuine surprise, it's actually good. When I went into this game, I was fully expecting a shit show. From my experience, licensed games generally tend to be a bit rough sometimes, and don't get me wrong, this game isn't perfect. It has its fair share of issues like the occasional shitty vehicle, as well as its underwhelming size, which is something I personally relate to, but for the most part, it's a decent game. The gameplay is fun and doesn't get boring, the levels are interesting and well designed and have a brilliant Scooby-Doo style vibe, as does the plot. It's all around a solid experience. Would I recommend it over the more famous and successful platformers out there? No, of course not. But Scooby-Doo Unmasked is definitely worth a shot if you like platformers or Scooby-Doo, so give it a go if you're interested. If nothing else, it at least beats giving lollipops to annoying kids.